let's spend a few minutes talking about how to take notes on a reading or a lecture and how to prepare for your tests. This is the textbook we're using. It's an open source text. We're outlining Chapter 1. To begin, look at your reading and don't read it. Just look. Look for the headings, the main ideas or categories. Note on the right, you can see the heading of this section from Business Communication for Success, the open source textbook we're using. You'll note that they're in larger font. Sometimes there's a color difference, and they'll be in the same format. So in this case, all those major headings are numbered, 1.1, 1.2, 1.3, 1.4. It's going to be consistent. So you know how the writers and editors organize this information, which gives you a cue and a clue as to what is important and what will be on the test if the instructor tests evenly over what you've read. Subheadings will be in slightly smaller font than the headings, but they won't be normal text. They will be bolded, they might be a different color, they will be set apart by a little bit of white space, and they tend to focus on sections, questions, vocabulary, or roles. You should expect comparisons to be within these subheading sections. So in those paragraphs, you're probably going to find the information that tests and discussions will really focus on. Look for selective highlighting, a bolded word or phrase, in which case you'll want to define and look for examples. You'll want to think about contrasts, and look for italics. Those are words in other languages. Look at bulleted or numbered lists. Realize that when you enter university, your instructors expect you to use visual hierarchies that they provide to understand the scope, organization, and relationships in the material. So whether it's in a lecture or whether it's in a reading, they want you to look for, find, and be able to work with those visual hierarchies. They also want to see you develop visual hierarchies in the material that you produce. In your business communication, when you enter your job, you're expected to create consistent visual hierarchies for longer messages. So if you have a long email, you'll want to have sections so that people don't have to read every part of it to understand what you're covering, and they can glance at it on their phone and have a sense of what's contained in the email. And if there's something that they need to do, it should stand out so that they can quickly go to it and execute. So if we look at this page from our textbook, which is online, Business Communication for Success, you'll see the subheadings. They're bolded. They are surrounded by white space. They have paragraphs that follow them, and you can see 2 on this page. You'll also see self-concept, which is in the second paragraph and is selectively highlighted, which tells you it's an important word or term. So what do we recommend? If you have a reading, outline the chapter as you're walking through it. So maybe even before you start reading in depth, do a quick chapter outline. This is the kind of level that I would expect you to be at this point when you first get a chapter. So outline first, and then add those definitions and examples next. Consider that these definitions and examples are likely to be part of test questions. So you can see the rest, some more of the chapter outlined here, but not fully fleshed out with all the information. At the top, you'll see those 8 essential components of communication. Here's the rest of the chapter. Think about the categories and consider contrasts. This first look at a chapter really gives you a sense of where the instructor might focus. If your instructor gives you any sort of guided lecture notes like we do, you can use those to guide your note-taking, to come back to your notes, to think about what's important, to know what you really want to spend time on. In this case, if you look at the first question, what are the 8 essential components of communication and what do they look like in real life? You can see that I filled this out with a lot of information from my reading because I know this is important. I want to highlight the most important elements of the reading and lecture. I want to think about potential test questions at this stage. I want to have examples. Now in your Cornell Notes, and you may or may not use Cornell Notes, but something similar should be used to anticipate test questions and prepare to test yourself. So in this case, I've used the Cornell Notes format to begin to ask questions. What is the self-concept? And then answer them to the right. So you can cover up one side of the page and test yourself the night before the test. So here's an example application question, and know that most of our questions will be application. So we'll have a mix of multiple choice and true false, often focusing on application, which is why the textbook itself is not much use to you during the test. You will want to know the information. So for this example, Amelie, a name, Amelie taps her fingers on the table while listening to her group leader discuss team goals at work. Which of the 8 elements of communication are her finger taps? So you'll see out of those 8 elements, probably 5 listed. What's the correct answer? Interference, right? She's interfering with the message because she's loud enough that the group leader can hear her and is getting not only noise feedback, which would be what? Environmental feedback, environmental interference, but also the feedback that she is distracted, that she is not paying attention to the message. And as you look at your outline, create those test questions. Think about an example of a situation and ask about the category. So when you see communication in context and all these different types of communication, expect that you're going to see some examples and you'll be asked about which type this is. So here is a public lecture. Anyone on campus can attend. You can tell a lot of people are attending. So they've all wandered into this auditorium and they're paying attention. Is this public communication or mass communication? It's public communication. Mass communication would be more like a tweet. Is our textbook transactional or constructivist? So there are 2 models of communication. And in the lecture, we talk about how the textbook is constructivist because it focuses on shared meaning. That's the end. I hope that you've gotten a lot out of this. This is what's expected when you're in college. It's just a process like any other, and it allows you, by walking through these steps, to better understand where you're going and what the instructor wants you to get out of this experience. Thanks a lot. Bye.